Good evening, everyone, and welcome into One-on-One Nightly. I'm Andrew Galata alongside Jack Rhodes. Kayla Wenzel will also join us in a few minutes for our first segment as well. We'll be live with you guys from 9 to 10:30 on Twitter and YouTube. And Jack, it's great to be with you tonight as we have a jam-packed show in store for everyone tonight. We'll get into the Mets firing Jared Porter, the MLB hot stove, the NFL playoffs as my Saints did fall to Tom Brady and the Bucks. And then the Nets are finally getting their big three back together here with Harden, Irving, and Durant. It should definitely be a great show and definitely a busy time in sports.
Yeah, definitely in terms of the Nets, the Mets, and all that's going on in football right now, we've got plenty to talk about.
Yeah, it's crazy. I feel like New York sports, like right now, you have everything going on, even though like you would think like none of the NFL teams made the playoffs. Like you would think that there wouldn't be a lot of news there, but the Jets, they just hired a new coach, Robert Saleh, and, they're putting in their new regime there. And then, basketball, looking at those two teams, they're looking really good right now. Like, what if I would have told you that it looking like in basketball and baseball, it could be possible that all four teams, New York teams, make the playoffs?
I don't like that. It's funny because it's like the Nets and the Mets, who are typically like more the afterthoughts of New York sports, are right now making like the big time moves. And the Nets and the Knicks are kind of like making the smart, calculated moves. And, Knicks are like actually doing all right this year, 7-8, like have a legitimate shot at making the playoffs. Yankees not spending crazy money on a guy they really need to keep, making some smart moves in the pitching department. Nothing too crazy, but the smart moves.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, you talk about the Mets, they made their splash moves. And, I want to get into our first segment and welcoming Kayla onto the show as the Mets had a very eventful day yesterday on Tuesday between the Jared Porter firing and then also with George Springer. He went to the Blue Jays and the Mets were obviously in on him as well. But I do want to start off with the Jared Porter firing as he was fired Tuesday morning after 62 unsolicited and explicit text messages to a foreign female reporter back in 2016. Mets owner Steve Cohen said that in my initial press conference, I spoke about the importance and integrity, and I meant it. There should be zero tolerance for this type of behavior. And, for me as a Mets fan, it's really two things. It's like, I think this is for every fan and everyone that follows baseball. I mean, it's really disgusting to hear that, this stuff still goes on, in sports and baseball and no tolerance for it for sure. And I think that, Steve Cohen and Sandy Alderson said that, we're going to try to fix our stuff and, what we do to kind of, do those background checks and try to vet candidates. So you kind of weed those people out. So it'll be interesting to see that. And then B, for the Mets, it's almost like a snapback to reality because it's like all this good stuff was going with Steve Cohen. They got Lindor. They talked about the culture. Everything was going good. And then you have something like this bombshell, and then compound that with the George Springer stuff. To me, it's just like, okay, now it's maybe back into reality. And again, now to me, the most important thing is to see how they bounce back from it as we're still in the offseason, see what they do with the GM job. To me, it should be really interesting.
Yeah, there are two angles here, and one of them you mentioned is Jared Porter's out of a job after 37 days. And the other one, which, is definitely the more important topic here, is this is kind of proving not to be an isolated situation. You look at what happened in 2019 with the Astros and Brendan Taubman going on a tirade against female reporters after acquiring domestic abuser Roberto Osuna. Unfortunately, this is becoming more of an apparent reality in sports, and really it's the more important discussion over, what are the Mets going to do now?
No, yeah, I agree. And like you said, Andrew, it really kind of ends the honeymoon phase here. But I think that, like Jack was saying, it's more important to look at this as not just an isolated incident. I mean, I think Sandy Alderson said that when they vetted him, they never talked to any women reporters. They never asked anybody else about anyone who was a woman about his qualifications. And so I think that there's just a huge disconnect, and just I think that it also underlied, like, so 2020, we saw all of these women accomplishments in sports. And then 2021, we snap right back to these accomplishments have not actually made such deep and needed change in the MLB. The organization itself is still like fraught with sexual assaults and sexual abuse. And I think that it's something that they can put like Kim Ang is somewhere in a great position and they can be applauded for having a female like GM. But deep down, these things are still happening, even though they have great moves and big strides. There's still a lot below the surface.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's not like a Mets issue. Like, it's not like just the Mets. And like the Mets kind of got caught in the middle because they had no idea. And you could talk about, obviously, they should have probably vetted better. They probably should have asked women and all that stuff. But you could probably talk about it more as a whole MLB issue. Like, what about the Cubs, who, like, the reporter told someone in the Cubs organization, and then they were worried about a lawsuit and not what she was going through, which is just crazy. Like this stuff has to be changed at a fundamental level as you talk about, the organization as a whole, not just one particular team. So again, it's interesting. And then, we'll see how that goes forward, especially, what Sandy Alderson said, like changing the vetting process. And he said, like, changing the culture of, everything when it goes on to hiring certain employees. And, you talk about Kim Ang being hired, and like that's a big step in the right direction. And then you have stuff like this go behind the scenes. It's just, I mean, it's like, okay, like it still exists, which is something that, again, it's disappointing still. And it just shows that we do still have, ways to go.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's not much more that I can add, It's great when you see, I mean, even the Red Sox being the first team to have like a female minor league coach, and that's great, but there are specific steps that need to be taken to make this a better league-wide situation.
No, I totally agree. And I think it's especially sad for this reporter. She doesn't even do journalism anymore. She left this occupation entirely because of the incidents. And so I think that there was just a huge mishandling in the beginning through the Cubs organization, who said, you should just drop this. We don't need a lawsuit about this. This isn't something that you should do. And she's a foreign reporter, so she also didn't even entirely understand the process. So she just went off of what her advisors were telling her. And so I think that there is definitely a lot to be said just about the culture and how it needs to change from top to bottom in order for these things to be handled correctly in the first moment. So then like 5 years later, it doesn't come out as a scandal. It's something that's taken care of and accounted for immediately.
No, yeah, exactly. And then, you don't have Jared Porter continuing to get like promotions, then he gets to GM and like all this stuff comes out. Like, again, that stuff should have always, should have been gone at the beginning. And then for the Mets, I feel like this is, an interesting situation for them, because now this is the second time in 2 years where you have like a big hire. You talk about the GM last year, the manager, they don't even make it to opening day. And they basically now have to switch back on a whim. Now Sandy Alderson's probably going to assume the GM role. And like, we're in the midst of a hot stove. You have George Springer just signing. Definitely want to get onto that. Like, again, the Mets moving forward, it's going to be interesting to see what they do, because now they got to move really quickly to try to basically pick up all these pieces and continue moving in the right direction, because they were doing it so well. Like, you had the Lindor stuff, you had the signings of James McCann, Trevor May, and it seems like everything was moving in the right direction. And then you have something like this that must spin just the interior of the organization. And to me, that's just, interesting. And then you have George Springer getting signed like 10 hours after that. And the Mets, who knows if Jared Porter was in on those negotiations and stuff like that. It's like such a quick turnaround. And like, again, who knows, like maybe if it was a different situation, let's say this happened a week ago and George Springer was, the Mets could at least stabilize a few things. Maybe they would have paid more money to get Springer. It's an interesting thing. And again, I think this is, just for the Mets in this offseason, and it's so important for them. That's just, to me, fascinating.
Yeah, now with assistant GM Zach Scott taking over, you have to wonder if that affects their standing with free agents that are still on the table, because I think Mets fans had really high expectations when Steve Cohen bought this team. And so far, it's been a very eventful offseason with the acquisition of Francisco Lindor. But I feel like a lot of Mets fans were like, okay, now what? And they were still in on those conversations with Springer, who they missed out on. Do they make a move for a guy like Trevor Bauer? And is that even feasible with all the change that's going on in their front office?
Yeah, I think Alderson said that something that they would miss most about Porter was his connections, that he had all of these different connections. And so I think that's a fair point, that if this happened maybe a week ago, would they still be in contention for Springer? Because the hot stove doesn't stop just because the Mets are having a crisis. And so I think that they could have had different moves. And I think that their offseason is going to look a lot different this month before spring training. I think that things that maybe they could have had an opportunity on, they no longer will have this opportunity on, because they're still trying to deal with their own mess. So how can they possibly be going out and trying to persuade anyone to come to their organization right now? They don't even have a GM. So how are they going to tell anyone, oh, look at how desirable the Mets are right now? Because now the Mets don't look that good.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the one saving grace for the Mets is you talk about Zach Scott. He was one of the finalists for the GM job in the beginning when they initially hired Jared Porter. So at least you have someone that you trust as your assistant GM. And I think that's a natural hire to your GM. I mean, I think Sandy Alderson said that it's not going to happen this year, or it's not going to happen just right away. Like, they don't want to rush into anything, but that's someone at least you trust that can at least probably take some of that pressure off of Sandy Alderson. And again, I mean, when you look at George Springer, he gets signed to this huge contract. And I do want to talk about that, because this is especially after the DJ LeMahieu stuff, where he gets paid 6 years, 90 million, which is, I mean, definitely a long-term deal, but Springer got 6 years, 150 million. Like, I mean, blew him out of the water. And I think the question is, like, were the Mets smart to maybe not go over that $150 million limit? And maybe, like, I'm pretty sure they only gave him like 125 or somewhere in that area. And he ended up going to the Jays. And again, I feel like with the Mets, it was smart. Like, they didn't reach and they didn't go over. You have a roster right now with the Mets that they have a good amount of holes. And I feel like you can go after one big fish, or you can kind of sprinkle in. You can get a guy like Jackie Bradley Jr. instead of Springer, who's definitely a pretty solid player. Jack, I know you know a lot about him because he played in Boston, and I feel like he's a guy that you can get after Springer. And, definitely in the bullpen as well. To me, I think the Mets, I know everyone wanted to get Springer and everyone wanted to get that big fish, but it's almost, I'm happy they didn't give the $150 million deal, because that's a huge contract to give to a player that, again, I mean, I feel like he's a very, very solid player, and the Jays got a great player, but for the Mets, they already got their star with Lindor. Like, I would like to see them build around him with some complementary pieces.
I completely agree. And one of the most exciting young teams in baseball right now is the San Diego Padres, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you guys remember this, but when Manny Machado initially signed there, everyone was making fun of him. And I know that Manny Machado and Springer are different caliber players, but the Blue Jays needed that kind of star to make them to further their development, and to me, I just think that the Mets are in a different stage of development. They need other pieces across the board to build on that talent they have now, whereas Springer's kind of the guy around that young talent that they have in Toronto.
Yeah, Springer definitely adds a layer of experience to their team that they needed. They needed a veteran player to join their lineup. And I think that in terms of $150 million, it was probably best for the Mets not to do that, not to go for that deal, especially after Francisco Lindor. But like for the Jays, it made sense. They have that money. They still haven't gone over their luxury tax. Like, they still have more that they can be spending. And so for them, why not make a huge purchase? And they were one of the only ones, them and the Padres really are one of the only ones in the offseason who is willing to do such a thing right now. And so I think that for them, Springer makes sense, but that for the Mets, maybe that money just wasn't really worth it.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Springer, he's a guy that's going to be, obviously he plays center field, but he's going to be at the center now of this Jays team. When you talk about all of their young stars, and you talk about Vlad Guerrero Jr., Kevin Biggio, Bo Bichette, Randall Grichuk's there too. They got, murderers row their lineup. And when you look at this Blue Jays roster, you're starting to think, okay, this team could maybe compete with that AL East, which is just a great division, and it adds now. You got three really, really solid teams. And, talking locally with the Yankees, they're a team that got DJ LeMahieu, but they haven't really added anybody else. I know they add Corey Kluber, but they haven't made a huge signing. And to me, should the Yankees, should they start to worry about what they're doing? And now you have the Rays, they're a team that's up and coming. And I know they got rid of Blake Snell, but I feel like the Rays, they don't operate like they need one big star. Like they're a team that's definitely, they're more the sum as a whole of its parts. And, you don't need that big ace. And to me, I don't think they do. And now you have a Blue Jays team who's young and they're willing to spend a lot of money and they're going to be really competitive. And now you have the Yankees who I know they're kind of feeling like they're the confident big boys on the block. But again, like you can see where these two young teams can definitely compete with the Yankees in that division.
Yeah, the Rays are the only team in the AL East that have gotten better so far. I mean, the Yankees add Corey Kluber. I think that's a good signing, but they lose Jay Happ. He signs in Minnesota. That's pretty much a wash in my book. And right now, the Yankees pitching staff, there are just too many question marks for me outside of Garrett Cole. You've got a guy past his prime in Corey Kluber. You've got two guys that have had extended absences from baseball in who are the two guys? Herman and Severino. And then you're putting a lot of stock into Jordan Montgomery and Debbie Garcia, who I know has a ton of potential, but that's a lot of pressure to put on a young player. And with who's still on the market, I don't know who is the fit for this Yankees team that certainly isn't signing Trevor Bauer.
Yeah, I think I'd be a little stressed if I was a Yankees fan. I think that the Blue Jays have really tilted the power balances there a little bit. Like, I don't think I see the Rays being all that good this year. I know that you guys don't have a lot of problems with them, but they got rid of Blake Snell, Charlie Morton. They missed out on Joe Musgrove, Corey Kluber. I don't know. I think that they've lost a lot of talent, actually. And so I think that if I was a Blue Jays fan, I'd be feeling pretty confident about my chances in the American League. I think that the Yankees have not done much to change up the status quo. Like you said, they're pretty mellow right now. I don't really see the Red Sox and the Orioles doing anything too big. And so, sorry, Jack, but I don't.
It's okay.
And I think that the Rays, even though they operate differently and they are a smaller market team, and they do different things, I still think that the Blue Jays are the favorite right now. I think that with their recent acquisitions, they're building a really strong name.
No, yeah. And then, you talk about going further, Kirby Yates, a great bullpen guy, and they're going to keep adding. They're right in the middle of maybe getting Brad Hand. They're very interested in him. So he's another guy that they can possibly get. And like if they keep building a good team, I could definitely see them being right in the midst of that race. I mean, to me, the Yankees, the guy that they're missing in the rotation is Masahiro Tanaka, and the Yankees just don't want to pay him. I mean, why are the big bad Yankees all of a sudden not want to pay, a guy that's been, it's not like he's just a free agent that's been good with another team. He's really helped them in the postseason. Like the Yankees know that he's a guy that, they can trust in a big postseason game, which to me is just, it's really questionable. Cause like if I was a Yankees fan, like all of a sudden we're not going to pay Tanaka and we're going to go in with a lot of unproven guys, the guys that have been out of the league for a while. I mean, Domingo Germán, he was a guy that was almost retired. And that's something to me that, like, if I was a Yankees fan, I'd be a little mad. I mean, I know they got DJ LeMahieu. I know they got Corey Kluber, who, former All-Star. But, like, if you feel like you're losing, major ground to a team like the Rays and the Blue Jays, like, you're like, how is this happening?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see the Yankees utilizing the trade market. I definitely see them going after a guy like Luis Castillo in Cincinnati, who's kind of seeming like after 1 year of putting all the chips on the table, they're just going to start selling guys. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Yankees did something like that. But until they do, I don't know if they have what it takes to make them, I don't know, even the American League favorite.
Yeah. And I think, like you were saying, Andrew, with Tanaka, I think it's so weird that they haven't signed him. Like, he literally said, I don't know if this is still recent, but he literally said he would either go back to Japan or keep playing with the Yankees. So why wouldn't you just pay him? He's not that expensive. He's not going to take up too much of their budget. He wants to be in New York. He wants to be at your team. He's not a bad pitcher. He's pretty solid. So I don't understand why you wouldn't take someone who wants to be on your team and fills a need that you have.
No, yeah, I mean, to me, I really, it's just like, especially because it's the Yankees. Like, this is something like the Wilpons would do with the Mets. Like, I mean, it is. I mean, like just as a Mets fan, you're like, oh, that's something that like I don't know why the luxury tax is such a I guess it's a really hard cap for the Yankees this year. I mean, I understand they lost money, but you're saying after 1 year, you're all of a sudden like not the big bad Yankees anymore and this big team. I mean, I don't know. To me, that's something that like it shocks me almost that like the Mets are outspending the Yankees, the Blue Jays, who are playing next year in Buffalo, mind you, like they're outspending the Yankees. Like to me, that's something that is going to be really interesting, and especially when you look at really across the American League. I mean, you talk about who's the real powerhouses there. You talk about the Rays, the Yankees. We were talking about the Astros a lot pre-show, like they're another team, but really not that much there. And I don't know, like especially if you're the Yankees, I feel like why aren't they trying to pounce on this to try to go to a World Series? Because this is kind of their shot. And a lot of people said when they were going after Garrett Cole and they signed him, like this is the Yankees league, the American League is the Yankees league, and now all of a sudden they're like, gas off, we may not even win our division. Like to me, that's just super interesting.
Yeah, the Yankees have a lot of work to do, and it's funny because I understand like the whole, there's a huge difference between like an $8 or $9 million guy and like a $15 to $20 million guy. And I feel like that's the disparity, like that's the difference in the talks that they're having with Tanaka right now. But I mean, if you like, I remember the Yankees fans are saying you don't pay for 7 years. You pay that price tag. You pay those years for that prime. And here we are in that prime. This is the time for them to win it. And you're playing hardball over a couple $1,000,000 on a really key impact guy.
Yeah, I have no pity for the Yankees really for their spending woes. I mean, I understand that it was a hard offseason, but it was a hard 2020 for a lot of people. So to me, I think that they're being kind of ridiculous. I think a lot of the MLB free agency is being kind of crazy about how little people are willing to spend. I understand the luxury tax. I get that they lost billions of dollars, but you get billions of dollars every year. What were you doing? You never were saving? Like, I don't know. I just don't think that makes any sense that suddenly they have one bad year and now they can't afford anything. They don't want to make any trades. They have to be super cautious. I mean, like you said, they're the New York Yankees. So if the Yankees are going to be cutting corners for budgets, then I think that there's something wrong with that. I think that is very out of context and weird.
Yeah, no, it's definitely really interesting, and you talk about just every other move, and like the hot stove has been pretty slow. It's picking up as of late, and we'll get into that in our next segment. But I mean, I don't know, it's really questionable. Like you said, like were these teams just like burning money? Like especially the Yankees, who like they have definitely brought in a ton of money before the pandemic, like for sure. Like I guess they didn't see it coming. I mean, I don't know how much they lost, fully, but again, to me, it's really interesting. It's definitely head scratching if I was a Yankees fan or even some other big market teams as well. But that is going to wrap up our talk about this Yankees team. Next, we're going to continue talking about the MLB hot stove. Ton to get into here, as now it seems like everything is starting to pick up with rumors, big moves. Definitely get into all of that. But first, we are going to take a quick break. You are listening to One on One Nightly. Welcome back into One-on-One Nightly. I'm Andrew Galata alongside Jack Roach, and we're going to continue our talk on the MLB hot stove here, as it was a pretty interesting day with Michael Brantley, I think. I mean, you talk about him, it looked like 1 minute he was going to the Blue Jays, and all of a sudden he spurns them, goes signs with the Astros, 2-year, $23 million. He's just such a consistent professional hitter. To me, this is a really good signing for the Astros. You get him at a good price too. I know he's kind of old, but 2 years, $23 million is definitely, to me, to get a guy like him. I think that's really big there for the Astros, especially after losing Springer. They kind of back that up. Let's go get Brantley and keep and retain him. So, I mean, to me, I feel like, especially after losing Springer, Astros need more professional hitters. I think they were really good in the postseason because they got those big hits when they needed to. And Brantley was a big part of that. He hit 300. I mean, this guy's just a hitting machine. He hits 300 basically every year, which, I mean, he goes completely under the radar too, all-star games as well. I mean, to me, this is just a really high quality signing. And Jack, I know you don't like the Astros, but you got to admit this is a good signing.
Yeah, no, it's a great signing for the Astros. And a lot of people had the expectation that him to Toronto was pretty much a done deal. He's apparently very good friends with George Springer. There were all sorts of reports that it's over. And then we get the Jeff Passan tweet. Oh, no, there's not a contract yet, but they're close. And then next thing you know, he's in Houston. And it is very important for them to hang on with him with the departure of Springer. But with that being said, I don't think that this is a huge miss for the Blue Jays.
Oh, no.
And it would have been a good addition for that money. It wasn't crazy expensive, but I just don't feel like that's the biggest need for them right now. That lineup was the 7th highest scoring team in 2020, and they just added George Springer. So with a team that's already spent a lot of money, maybe that extra $32 million that they get back could be better used on a reliever. I know we're hearing rumors with Brad Hand. I think that goes a long way, more so than it could have with Brantley.
No, yeah, I mean, I agree. I feel like they're a team kind of like the Mets, where I feel like even though like the Mets lost out on Springer, they lose out on Brantley, like they're going to definitely reinvest those funds. It's not like it's going away, like, oh, we lost out on our guy, we're not going to do anything. Like, I feel like the Blue Jays are going to go out and keep fixing holes just like the Mets, I think, will. And to me, I think that is just, I mean, for the Blue Jays, we just talked about them. I think that's a team, if you can add relievers, if you can add maybe more starting pitching, we'll see what they end up doing. But I feel like overall, for the Astros, good signing for them, as they're going to try to continue to build a sustainable winner, and he's going to be a big piece of that here over the next 2 years. And then for the Blue Jays, I think they're going to keep doing what they're doing. I think they're going to go after these big players, and they're going to hope to land a few. And speaking of big players, we're going to get into a few really right now are, to me, the big three left. And that's Trevor Bauer, Marcell Ozuna, and JT Realmuto here. And right now we're going to start with Trevor Bauer, as there was news that came out today that the Dodgers are interested in him. And if the Dodgers needed any more pitching, I mean, I guess they do. So they're going to go out and try to get Trevor Bauer. I mean, this would just be completely insane if they were able to land Bauer, especially like Bauer. He's a type of guy that I feel like he wants to go to an underdog and make a team good. Like if he went to the Dodgers, that would just be, I don't know if it's a cop-out, but it almost is a cop-out for him going into a great rotation. And I don't think he ends up doing it. But when I saw that on my phone, and I was just like, oh, no, they won't. Because that's just like, oh, I mean, my mind was like, oh, like if they do that, crazy.
But I feel like it honestly wouldn't be that shocking if it even happened. I just feel like Trevor Bauer is such a crazy player that he'd be like, oh, they're interested in me? Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. He is one of the game's most interesting players. And honestly, it seems like the Dodgers are kind of kicking the tires on just about everyone. Like there were rumors that they were exploring a Nolan Arenado trade as if their current roster isn't enough. Like I guess it's good to see a team that finally gets that taste of winning and then doesn't sell out. Like there are teams that are still spending that money, still making active moves. And I really think that that's a good thing for baseball.
No, yeah, I mean, for sure. I just feel like baseball right now, it's very top heavy, and then you have just everyone else. And this would be like, it's great that the Dodgers, they keep doing their thing, and like that would be good. But I feel like you want other teams to get good players like Bauer. And, I mean, do the Dodgers need Bauer? Do they need Arenado? Like, no, like they don't. And I know they're going to try and go out to get them. And hey, they should do their due diligence. Maybe they get a good deal on some of these guys. But like, I mean, if they added a Bauer, I mean, a guy that had a 1.7 ERA last year, he's just that ace type attitude. You add him with Kershaw, like to me, that's just insane. And I would rather see him with, I mean, a lot of other teams than the Dodgers. Basically, the only teams I would want to see him less on is a team like the Nationals or the Phillies or like the Yankees for me as a Mets fan. Like that would be the only teams worse. I mean, when you look at all these other teams, Angels, Mets, and Giants of all teams are interested in on him as well. And I would definitely like those teams to go after him. Obviously, the Mets, I would love if he can go to the Mets here. I am a big fan of Trevor Bauer. I think he's a guy that, an ace guy. Like, I feel like you give him the ball anytime, and he's going to try to win you a game. I love that attitude. I think he actually ends up going to the Angels, though. I feel like he definitely has, like, that West Coast type vibe. And I feel like the Angels, like, trying to steal a spotlight from the Dodgers. I feel like he's the type of guy to do that. You said, like, he's kind of just a little quirky, and I feel like that's kind of the position for him.
Wait, so you're telling me you'd rather see him? I agree that the Angels are the best fit, but going back to the NL West, you'd rather see him sign with the Giants than the Dodgers?
Yeah, I would.
Oh.
I mean, I know it doesn't really add to them. Like, I mean, but maybe that makes it more competitive in that division. And I don't know. Yeah, I would rather see him on a team that's at least fringe. Like, I mean, I know the Giants were not good last year, but I mean, maybe adding Bauer really helped them.
The Dodgers checking in on guys like Bauer and continuing to make moves is the reason why we have a team like the Padres doing what they're doing now. Like I really do think that good teams staying good is very good thing for baseball, and the White Sox are making those moves and the Padres are doing that. And then you've got the Yankees doing nothing, and if they don't win, it's because it's the lack of those moves while the rest of the league gets better.
No, I mean, I do agree with that, but I don't know. But then you have teams like the Cubs. Like, they're a team that's just shipping off Yu Darvish basically as salary dump. You talk about the Rays; they did the same thing with Blake Snell. That's something that, like, I want the players, like, especially when you talk about really good players, like, they should try to keep their stars. Like, even Francisco Lindor with the Indians, and I know that the Mets were the big beneficiary of it, but like, teams should be able to retain their best player. Like, if that doesn't happen, I think you have issues. And that's just kind of my main thing there. And I feel like stars should try to, I don't know, everyone going to the Dodgers seems almost like a cop-out. And to me, it's worse for the league. It's worse for just the competitive nature of the league.
Yeah, but Blake Snell and Yu Darvish are both under contract. Like, it's not like they weren't being, like, they couldn't retain ownership of these guys. They were under contract. They decided to pay these guys. And if it's not going to be the teams that they initially signed for, teams like the Padres are going to say, yeah, we'll pay good players legitimate money that they deserve. Like, it's not the Dodgers and Padres' fault that other teams are sitting pat right now.
No, it's not their fault. I just, like, I would almost penalize the other teams that are just not that, like, to me, that's something that, I don't know. We'll drop it for now because I want to talk about Marcell Ozuna.
Okay.
Because I love Marcell Ozuna. Like, I would actually, like, he's a guy that I think going into this year, I'd want him more than Springer. And I know he's going to cost a lot less. I think he's a guy that he doesn't have the defense, but his bat is electric. And he helped that Braves team. Watching him in the NL East for a really long time with the Marlins and then with the Braves last year, he's a guy that reminds me a lot of Yoenis Cespedes when he came to the Mets. And I would like to see Ozuna on the Mets. Why? I know it's a square peg in a round hole, but so is Cespedes, and he brought that team to a pennant, NL pennant. He's a guy that, you look at his 60 games, he had 56 RBIs in 60 games. Like, to me, that's just insane. I mean, he's a guy that I would love to see him in the middle of a Mets lineup, someone like him. He's a guy that I completely love.
I think Ozuna is a great player, but do you think if you're trying to sell Mets fans on him and you go and say, oh, yeah, this guy is the next Cespedes, do you think that gets Mets fans excited for him?
I think it does. And why do I think it does is because Mets fans, I think at the end of the day, at least this is how I feel. I feel like that Cespedes contract and his tenure with the Mets, I think it was positive. As much as there was so much crazy news, he brought the team to a pennant or helped them. Like, the Mets don't make 2015 World Series without Yoenis Cespedes. I think we could all agree with that. And I feel like he's a guy that jump-started that team, just like I think Ozuna can not jump-start this Mets team, but add to it and give it some more depth, give it some more, I think, electric, between the power, between timely hitting. He's a guy, you add him with Lindor, I think that's a dynamic duo, and you already have guys like Pete Alonso, Dom Smith. And I know that he doesn't really play a lot of center field. Maybe he would with the Mets. I don't know. I don't think he would. I think he would probably have to keep Brandon Nimmo there, and he would play a left field. So I don't think the Mets will do it because the Mets want more defensive guys. They want more guys like George Springer, but I don't know. I really love Marcell Ozuna. So I'll leave it there and move over to JT Realmuto, someone the Mets chose not to go after, which I thought was really interesting in the offseason. They ended up getting, James McCann, and he's a guy that I feel like is solid, but they didn't go after, to me, the best catcher in baseball, best catcher in the game. And I think earlier this year, he wanted something like $200 million, but I think now it's a lot lower. His whole contract to me and his whole market dropped. And now the Phillies, they have a contract with him, or, they have a deal with him for $110 million, excuse me. They have a contract on the table. We'll see what happens there, but he's a guy, I mean, good for the Phillies if they waited him out and they got a deal like that for only $110 million for, to me, the best catcher in the game.
Yeah, I just don't know how many teams are kind of going to swoop in for JT Realmuto when that offer's already on the table. Like, I don't feel like there are that many teams that are just going to like put down a sneaky offer of $120 million. Like, considering that that's almost a low ball to a player of his caliber, it just, I don't see another team coming in. And I think that there's going to be a little stalemate, but they'll eventually settle. And I think that that's a good fit in Philly with Bryce Harper. And, I think that they're building something over there. I think Kayla would agree with us.
100%. I absolutely love the Phillies fan, but I'm very hopeful that they keep JT Realmuto. And so I think that if they do, it could be really good. I think it would be a terrible move to lose him, but I also don't think many other teams, like you said, Jack, actually need a catcher right now. I don't know how many teams want a catcher and how many teams even want to spend that much money. So the Phillies have not done much in this off season, but I'm hoping that if they keep JT Realmuto, it'll all make sense.
No, I mean, the Phillies are an interesting team, I feel. They're a team, especially if they keep Realmuto. It seems like they have a lot of name players. They haven't been able to put it all together of late. And then that division between the Braves and the Mets, and now the Marlins out of nowhere. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what they do, but they have, especially if they get Realmuto. And he's a guy that I think catchers really don't get any love, but they should get all the love. Because, you looked how he just handled that pitching staff, and just watching him as a Mets fan and like the big plays that he would make in close games, whether it's blocking the ball late in the game, whether it's calming a pitcher down, getting the big hit too. I mean, the guy does hit like 280 and 25 home runs consistently. He's a guy that I feel like not a lot of people are like, oh, JT Realmuto, I like, oh, he's the best catcher. But, like other teams, like we got, Fernando Tatis, who's, just this electric player. Like he's not going to, win you the headlines, but he just does some great, under the radar stuff that really help your team. And it definitely annoys the opposing team.
Yeah, he's one of those rare catchers that are elite with the glove and the bat. You really don't see many guys behind home plate that can do it both. So I really think it's crucial for the Phillies to bring him back.
No, yeah, for sure. And, a team, they were talking about maybe like cutting payroll and basically like the rest of the league. It would be good to see them kind of maybe revert that, especially with Dave Dombrowski, who's kind of running things there. That would be a nice, change for them and keep people spending. Even if it's a division rival, I would like teams to keep spending and, keep them relevant. That's kind of been my thing in this segment. But that does wrap up our baseball talk here for the night. On the other side of this short break, we're going to get into some NFL as we recap the divisional round games and a lot more. We'll be right back. Welcome back into One-on-One Nightly. I'm Andrew Galata alongside Jack Roach, Kayla Wenzel, and we're going to get into the NFL divisional round, recapping that. And again, this was, to me, a good weekend of games, coming off of Super Wildcard weekend where you had some good games, now going into divisional round. For me, it was a sad one, and we'll get right into it because I think this was the biggest game of the week. Definitely all the headlines, Breeze, Brady, Saints, Bucks. And to me, this game, I mean, it's a sour taste to me as a Saints fan, the end of an era, the Drew Brees era. I think that we can all say that he's most likely going to retire here after this loss. And this game for him was just uncharacteristic, to say the least. 4 turnovers for the Saints offense, which hasn't happened all year. And that kills the Saints in the end. And to me, the Saints defense played well against Brady. I mean, Brady didn't have a huge game, like 199 yards passing, but he didn't turn the ball over. And that was really, to me, the big difference in this game. It was the Saints killed themselves. They shot themselves in the foot. Buccaneers didn't. Hats off to their defense. But to me, that was kind of the storyline of this game.
Yeah, I watched that game and I walked away with the thought that, it was time. It was time. Breeze, you mentioned uncharacteristic. You can't really recall any Breeze performances like that. And you know better than me, Andrew. I'm not a diehard Saints fan like you, but I mean, in my book, Breeze will be that like model of consistency throughout his career. And just seeing them go down in that fashion was definitely strange. That whole game, even seeing Brady and Breeze go off in that nature was just strange. A strange game.
Yeah, and I think also like a report came out later today that Breeze, it was uncharacteristic of him to play that way. And I think that he also had like deeper injuries than we actually knew from his like first injury with the ribs. It said that he also had a torn rotator cuff and torn fascia. So, I mean, talk about a bad way to go out. Like he was in pain. He was trying to push through an injury throughout the whole thing. And then it was a poor performance and it was upsetting, especially considering it could be his last one.
Yeah, I mean, like him playing through all those injuries, Michael Thomas, who the big Saints receiver, he was blanked in this game, who played through injuries. And it was almost like, let's try just all our might. Let's try to get Breeze one last Super Bowl. And it just came up short because, 4 turnovers. And I thought the Saints defense was good enough to at least give him a shot, I think, to make it. I mean, that defense, no one really talked about it, but they were, outstanding all year. And I really hope that group stays together because that's a group that I think that the Saints could really build on. Marshawn Lattimore, Cameron Jordan, Demario Davis. Not a lot of people talk about them, but I just want to give them some love because they held Tom Brady. They held Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, who everyone said coming into this game was going to have this huge game, 1 catch, 10 yards. And to me, at the end of the day, the offense let the Saints down, which is so uncharacteristic. And again, it kind of is what it is. And with the Bucks, their defense played outstanding. Give them the credit. And not a lot of people are going to talk about their defense when they play Aaron Rodgers next week, but that could be the key. Like if they get a few turnovers off of Rodgers, to me, that's something that would obviously, be huge for them. So kind of hats off to them. And now they'll be moving on to play the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. And they completely dismantled, in my opinion, the Rams, the best defense in all football. And again, it felt like the Packers all year, I feel like they always feel like they're in control of games. I say the same thing with like the Chiefs, especially when they have Mahomes. It feels like they're always in control. Like they always got it. They're always cool. And to me, this was no different this game.
Yeah. And in basketball, we always talk about how LeBron James, defies age and all that at 36. But Rodgers is doing the same thing at 37. He is really, likely the MVP of the season. The Packers, it's just going to be crazy. I can't imagine Brady and Rodgers in an NFC championship. This whole season it's too much for me to process. I can't do it.
I like the Packers against the Bucks. I think that they have a really good chance, especially at Lambeau Field. I think that Rodgers has looked really good, like we were saying. And like you said, Andrew, the Rams had one of the best defenses and the Packers just picked it apart like it was nothing. So I think that the Packers have a lot to be optimistic for in their game on Sunday. I think that they look good against the Bucs. I know that Tom Brady is great, obviously, and there will be a big battle between Brady and Rodgers, but I do like the Green Bay Packers' chances.
No, yeah, I mean that game's going to be outstanding. When you look at earlier in the season in that game, the Bucs completely destroyed the Packers, which, I mean, again, I feel like we'll see what happens. I feel like Rodgers at that point, he's a guy, I feel like he's going to come in like, oh, you beat me the first time, but like he's the type of guy that I feel like definitely has a chip on his shoulder, something to play for. And again, he's, I think, playing at his top of his game, which, like Jack, you were talking about LeBron at 36. This is, Rodgers 37. He looks amazing. And I mean, Drew Brees always talks about this, or used to talk about it more. He said that quarterbacks, especially like early in the career, they have all the physical, but they don't have the mental. And then as you get later in the career, you can kind of pick up all that mental stuff. And if you can just keep the physical, attributes to the highest point, or, a high enough point, then you're at your best. You're at your prime later because you have all this mental knowledge, you know what's coming, and your physical abilities are still up to notch. I feel like that's when quarterbacks are at their best. You talk about Brady when he had his big comeback against the Falcons, and he just completely, put the Patriots on his back for that Super Bowl. And that was like when he was 37, 38. So I think that's kind of, when you look at these great quarterbacks, like that's where they peak. And Rodgers is hitting it this season, and especially over like the last 10 games, feels like no one can stop them.
Yeah, and when we think of the Bucs, everyone's like Tampa Bay. He's 43 years old, doing all these crazy things. But you really hit at it, Andrew. The Bucs' identity is in their defense, and that's how they're gonna contend for a Super Bowl, and that's how they've gotten this far. And I mean, they've got the offensive talent, but it's really overshadowed by their defense.
No, they're definitely one of the top run defense teams in the whole league. But talking about defying age, Tom Brady, he's 43. Aaron Rodgers is defying age at 37, but come on. Brady is clearly still performing so well. Even I say 43 as if it's old. It's old for football, but not for real life or anything. But yeah, I think that the key is going to be the defense here for the Buccaneers. And I think that will be really challenging for the Packers.
Yeah, the one last thing I'll say about the Bucs, I feel like the biggest change between this year and last year, I feel like Jameis, and who's the Saints backup, and I think he may be the Saints starter next season. I think that it was less on him than that defense being awful, being like bottom 5 in the league. And now this year it's top 10. That's a big change. And I know everyone wants to go to Brady, but that offense was good beforehand. I think Brady's better than Winston because less turnovers. And again, he's Tom Brady. But still, I think their defense has really, really improved. And if they're going to beat the Packers, it's not going to be because of Tom Brady outgunning Aaron Rodgers. It's going to be because of the Bucs defense, holding this Packers offense to at least like 27 points, something like that, where you can at least keep it reasonable. But I do want to flip it over to the AFC, where to me the most interesting game here was the Browns-Chiefs, as Patrick Mahomes, got knocked out of that game and everything changed. Everything changed, but Chad Henne, of all people, does enough to help the Chiefs move over into the AFC Championship game. And it looks like Mahomes is going to play in that game. But to me, this Browns team, they played well. They played gutty. And I feel like right now, when looking at what they did this whole season, kudos to them, because, just 4 years ago, they were 0-16, and now they were on the doorstep of an AFC Championship game. And you go back to, Rashard Higgins, who fumbles out of the end zone for a touchback. They lose by 5. That's, when you just pinpoint it on one play, you kind of could. And again, they just can't do enough. Chad Henne just does enough. And also shout out to Tony Romo, who had this amazing call at the end of that game. That was amazing. For someone who had nothing invested into it, even I was on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, the Browns' chances went out the window when they got the 4th down opportunity and they gave it up. The Henne run. Oh, we got our
the leash.
Technical difficulties. Kayla,
Kayla, you pick up for me.
I mean, I agree. The Browns really lost it there in that fourth down conversion that they didn't make. And so I just think that I liked the Browns. I liked Baker Mayfield. I really loved their talent. I loved seeing them in the playoffs. It was fun to watch, but it really was just the Chiefs game. And I just think that they outperformed them, even with the secondary quarterback.
No, yeah, I mean, just what the Chiefs can do, I mean, like on offense, they have so much weapons that like even Chad Henne can be successful with them. Like,
yeah.
Like, I mean, to me, it's kind of crazy, when looking at how good this offense is. And I know Patrick Mahomes, I don't want to discredit everything he does because he's so good. But to know that Chad Henne could even, win this game, and he had even some gutsy plays, just knows how dominant this Chiefs offense is. And it's going to be, to me, it's really hard for the Bills, who, we'll talk about as well. Their defense, they played really well against the Ravens, but it's going to be really hard for them to, stop Mahomes and even limit him, because they're that good when even with Henne, they can still, make some big plays and win a football game.
Well, like, how concerned are we about this injury with Mahomes? Is him missing time even this week, getting his reps in day to day? Like, I understand he's Mahomes, but if are we looking at an 80% Mahomes? And if that's the case, is that good enough to go out and beat the Bills?
Yeah, he did practice today. It was limited though. And even if he is practicing, I think that there's something to say that he might not be 100% still. Even though he might be back on the game on Sunday, it doesn't mean that he is the Patrick Mahomes that we all know. He could be dinged up and bruised a little bit and perhaps will not perform quite to the ability that we've seen him do before. So I think that that's a fair point. I think that's definitely reasonable to think about that. Even if he is there, will he be fully there?
I mean, even 80% Patrick Mahomes, I'd take over, I think, every quarterback besides Aaron Rodgers. That's how good Patrick Mahomes is. And, with his arm and like what he can do. And the one thing, I will say about Mahomes, like when they played the Saints earlier in the season, I said he was the only quarterback where I felt on every play, I felt like they can get a touchdown, like any play, like their offense is that electric. So again, the Chiefs will be a tough out here in this game, and the Bills are going to be their challengers, and the Bills are going to try to unseat them. And to me, they had a great win. And I know Josh Allen didn't play that good, but that defense, hats off to them. They completely stymied Lamar Jackson and, what they were trying to do. I know Lamar got hurt, but still, I mean, they played amazing. And that defense is definitely underrated. And again, they're going to have a similar performance like they did in the divisional round if they're going to go up and beat a team like the Chiefs.
You said it. I don't know what else to add on. That's it, and for me, like, we can talk about the Bills all we want, right? But I just don't know how a healthy Mahomes is beaten. Like, I don't know when we've seen a guy this good this early into their career. I mean, if they pull this off this year, he's going to have an MVP and 2 Super Bowls. And even if he doesn't, he's already got those other things under his belt, like, it's really reminiscent of what Rodgers has done early in his career.
Yeah. And I think that the Bills have a good chance. Matt Milano is going to be back for them, which is going to make a big difference on their defense. So I think that they are definitely going to compete. I don't think that it's going to be a blowout by any means by Mahomes, but I do think that maybe Josh Allen is not quite on the same caliber level as even 80% Patrick Mahomes. So it will be definitely interesting.
Yeah. I mean, also Josh Allen's had an awesome year. And, you talk about him, and he's a guy that had his struggles in the past few years. And this year, that arm talent just completely explodes. And you had Stephon Diggs, who I'm so happy is out of the NFC, because he is, to me, a great receiver. And especially in the playoffs, like, he's a guy that's going to go out there and compete. And, he's he did it to the Saints in the Minnesota Miracle. So again, he's a guy that to me is just dominant. And then, I feel like that team, the underdog mentality, I feel like just Buffalo in general, it's kind of like, they're just, I mean, they always do. They love the Bills, and, they're a city that, they're just engulfed by this team. And again, it's going to be a very interesting game. And, you look at Patrick Mahomes, the one stat that I want to bring up is they've lost like one game you look at since he's been in, he's lost one game in the past 2 years. He was out for a few games, so I think they lost 1 or 2. But when he starts, they lost one game in the last 2 years. That's completely insane in a game of football where anybody could beat anybody any Sunday. And Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and Andy Reid come in, and every game seems like they always have a handle on things, and they go out and dominate teams.
Yeah, and just I hear you talking about these quarterbacks, these elite quarterbacks. We've got Patrick Mahomes, we got Aaron Rodgers, and you say not too far behind is Josh Allen. And not to touch too much on, our next segment, but where does Deshaun Watson fall in that category of those elite quarterbacks?
I would say Deshaun Watson. I mean, he's just very interesting. Like I love Deshaun Watson, and to me, I think he's a top 5 QB. Like I think he's a guy that could be really good, and I think you put him in the right system. If he goes to the Jets, God help him. I mean, I know that Robert Saleh is going in there, and it will be a different team, but try to get him to a winner. Like, I think the Dolphins could be a really good fit for him, and Deshaun Watson, he's just, I mean, to me, a great player. And, we'll get into all this in our next segment. And our next segment is going to be, to me, important to me because, I mean, we'll talk about legacies with Brees, Phillip Rivers retiring, and just talking all about QB should definitely be really interesting. But first, we are going to take a quick break. You are listening to One-on-One Nightly. Back here on One-on-One Nightly. I'm Andrew Gullotta alongside Jack Roach and Kayla Wenzel, and we're going to continue our NFL conversation here, getting into some QB legacies. And, we talked about Brees and how he's most likely going to retire. Phillip Rivers, he announced his retirement as well after 17 years. Seems like Ben Roethlisberger, he's going to come back, but, I mean, he's a guy that still definitely nearing his end of his career. And I want to take a look here at Drew Brees, and, he's a guy to me, like he's the reason that I'm probably even, definitely a Saints fan, but probably the reason I'm even talking with you guys, just because he got me into, podcasting with the Saints and that stuff, which led me to FUV. So, I mean, shout out Drew Brees because, he's just so important, I think, not only to, my fandom, but what he does in New Orleans. And, you talk about his stats as well. I mean, career leading in passer, number 2 in touchdowns. And I know that it will all go away because Tom Brady will probably play forever. So he's going to take all those records. But Drew Brees, I mean, wins the Super Bowl for New Orleans. To me, he's a guy that I think his legacy to a city could be unmatched, just what he did with them and for a franchise. And again, he's a guy, once he retires, to me, is going to go down as top 10, top 5 best QBs.
Now, before I give any commentary, Andrew, I just want to say that almost makes me want to, like start shedding tears, man. That was beautiful.
It was sweet.
I'm not even joking. Like, I mean, he's a guy that, like you talk about, like when he was leaving the field and he took that last look back onto the Superdome, that like almost gave me tears. It did give me tears. It's like, I mean, that was like, he's like the one player, because I'm a big Mets fan, and David Wright, he was like the big player, for the Mets. He retired and Breeze was going to be the next one. And now it's like that era is over. So definitely want to add that, but Breeze unmatched in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, you think about players and not just what they do for a team, but what they do for a city. For me growing up, that was Big Papi. That was in 2013 after the Boston Marathon bombing. Him going on the field and saying, "This is our city." That is something that I will always remember. And New Orleans with Katrina, I'm sure that's Drew Brees, and that's the Saints. It goes beyond sports, and it really, hearing you say these things just goes to show how much he's made of an impact on and off the field.
Yeah, I think Drew Brees is such a class act. I mean, he really is just so incredible. And we've all mentioned it, but really his effect on New Orleans cannot be understated. I mean, he really came into a team suffering right after Hurricane Katrina, and he came into a franchise that needed help, needed rebuilding, and a city that needed rebuilding. And he came in and he did that, and he was that guy. And I think it's funny, especially because he has sort of a complicated legacy and that he only has one Super Bowl win. But I don't think that necessarily entirely matters. I mean, he never won MVP, but I think he was the MVP always to the city. I just think that even though these national accolades weren't quite for him, I just don't think that should undermine his impact on the NFL and on Louisiana.
No, yeah, for sure. And, you talk about he helped heal Louisiana and New Orleans. I mean, he was the guy that came in to be the Saints. His shoulder was all messed up, and a lot of people didn't think he would play again. The reason that he was played for the Saints was because the Dolphins didn't want him. They said that his physical was bad. And I mean, it just shows you when, you talk about the one Super Bowl. I mean, you talk about New Orleans. I mean, they were a joke of a franchise. They're basically like, the Jets now. That was the Saints. They were 3-13. They had one playoff win in the whole entire franchise history before Brees. One playoff win. And to me, that's just so crazy. And talk about a guy, him and Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis, that whole, regime came in there and they made them perennial winners. And you talk about all those great offenses that he was in, and to only get one Super Bowl is sour. When you're like, as a Saints fan, like they were amazing over the last 4 years. They're a team that won like 49 games, which is all great. But you talk about 2017, they lost with the Minnesota Miracle and that craziness when Marcus Williams missed a tackle to Stephon Diggs. 2018, the refs took it away from them after the no call. And 2019, 2020, the Saints lose. I mean, that's how it is. And yes, I know everyone will say maybe the Saints didn't get 2018 taken away. They did, and I'll stick towards that, because if that call gets called, the Saints kick a field goal, they go play the Patriots, and I think they beat the Patriots. But
it's a lot of ifs. It's a lot of ifs, and
it's one if. It's one if they go beat the Patriots. I think they do. That's just my opinion. And I feel like that Saints team was dominant. You go look at through the season. I feel like that was the perfect blend of Breeze still not on the complete decline, and that defense starting to come together good. And for him, it's unfortunate that like he declined, right when the defense got really good. Like if that happened 2 years earlier, like with Breeze, like maybe he does win the Super Bowl. That's something that to me is interesting. And, he goes half a decade with his defense being the worst in football, which again, for him, it's just unfortunate that he only gets one Super Bowl. But to me, he's one of the all-time greats. And again, top 10 QB for New Orleans. To me, that's just so big. And I want to talk about also who replaced Breeze in San Diego, now Los Angeles, with the Chargers, with Phillip Rivers. Because to me, he's even more interesting than Breeze because he didn't get a Super Bowl. He's a guy that went to the Chargers basically because Eli Manning didn't want to go to the Chargers, so they did that trade. And Phillip Rivers had a lot of success for sure. I mean, he retires as top 5 in touchdowns, passing yards, played over 250 games straight to finish off his career, which is the longest streak since Brett Favre. And to me, he's a Hall of Famer. I mean, he's not at the level of Breeze or, any of the top QBs, obviously never won the Super Bowl, but I mean, he's a guy that always went out, he always balled out, and he always gave it a shot, in my opinion.
I gotta say, I really think that, like at first I was thinking, wow, it's disappointing that Breeze only won one Super Bowl, but is it disappointing that Peyton Manning only won one Super Bowl for the Colts? Is it disappointing that Aaron Rodgers has only won one Super Bowl for the Packers? Is it disappointing that Phillip Rivers hasn't won one? These guys have all had fantastic careers. And to be quite honest, Tom Brady has kind of ruined it for everyone with 6 rings. Like, what, you're not happy with one Super Bowl, Drew Brees? Like, come on.
No, and there's so many other factors to a Super Bowl win, that it shouldn't underestimate how good these players really are and how good Phillip Rivers is. And I think what's funny about Phillip Rivers is that he came out of the 2004 draft class with Eli Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, and himself. And so I think it's just interesting, really, that after 17 seasons, he played great with the Colts. He was super likable, even though he had never been in a Super Bowl. And so I just think that he had such a great time and quite a great run since 2004. I mean, he's really just been such a big name to the NFL.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, him and Breeze, I feel like they didn't go out like Peyton Manning, where they were, I know Peyton Manning won a Super Bowl, but he was not the reason they won that second Super Bowl. I think we could all agree. Like, I feel like even Drew Brees, people want to say his arm diminished. He still had a good year this year, very, very solid. And Phillip Rivers, I think, had a solid year as well. And, I feel like going out, on top, that's why I don't want Breeze to play this next year, because I feel like this could definitely be the year where he completely tanks off. And you don't want to see him do that. You don't want to remember a quarterback like that. And I think same with Rivers. And, he's a guy that, always there. He played on, when he had no ACL, he had a surgery and he played the AFC Championship against the Patriots. And he played through that, an ACL tear. I mean, to me, that's just insane, and kept him in the game. Like, he was a gamer, and he's a guy that in my book, I feel like he ran into the Patriots a lot and he always lost. He never got through them. But you could say that about a lot of quarterbacks. Peyton Manning never really got through the Patriots as well. Talk about Andrew Luck. He's a guy that never got through the Patriots. Like, I mean, there's really no shame in that. And then you talk about after LaDainian Tomlinson leaves, Antonio Gates gets older, the Chargers weren't good, really. So he had a few good teams in the beginning of his career, but he ran into the Patriots. He ran into teams like the Steelers that were just better. And then throughout the end of his career, he didn't play with a lot of good teams. So that's unfortunate for him. And I feel like he's a guy that not a lot of people give him that much slack, but you talk about the 3 quarterbacks in that 2004 draft. I mean, I think he's up there. I mean, I think Big Ben is the best in my opinion. He has the 2 Super Bowls, has a lot of the stats as well. But then between him and Eli, you talk about the 2 Super Bowls with Eli, and I think it's very interesting because I feel like Phillip Rivers I think he's a better statistical QB, but Eli does the Super Bowls. To me, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, these guys going out, I really feel like, all these quarterbacks retiring is really ushering in a new era of dynamic, explosive quarterbacks that almost reminds me of like the NBA shying away from 7-footers and just embracing like the 3-point explosion. Like, the league is changing. Quarterbacks, like, it's a prerequisite to be mobile and have the ability to run. And you just didn't see that with Tom Brady and Drew Brees and all the guys that are now retiring.
Yeah, there definitely is a whole different style of play that the veteran players were used to, and now that the up and coming class is used to. So I think that is definitely a super different point about just the different styles of play. But like we were saying, with Rivers and with Breeze, that Super Bowls are not necessarily indicative of being great. And like, I don't think that we would say Manning is better than Drew Brees just because he won 2 Super Bowls. That does not make him the better quarterback, in my opinion. And so I think that there are so many factors that contribute on and off the field to Hall of Famers. Like, we were talking about this before the show a little bit, that should the Hall of Fame really just be about your stats, or should it be about what you did outside and what you did for the organization and who you were as a character and a person?
Yeah, and I feel like Rivers, I think he's a Hall of Famer for sure. I think Breeze is a Hall of Famer for sure. And when I think they'll both be first ballots, and when they go in, it's going to be really interesting because those are the two guys that Rivers took over for Breeze, and then Breeze's career skyrocketed, and then really Rivers had some really nice years in the beginning of his career, and then he just was that steady force with the Chargers. And he's a guy that, I mean, a lot of Chargers fans are probably like, oh, we missed out on Drew Brees. You're probably not feeling that because Philip Rivers was a great QB. So that's just kind of how I feel between those two guys. And Jack, you're talking about how the changing of the guard and Deshaun Watson may be changing his team, which I think we should talk about. He's a, obviously up and coming, to me, great QB, led the league in passing this year. And the Texans are a mess, and I don't even know what's going on with them. And I don't know if they end up trading Watson. They shouldn't, because I think people like Deshaun Watson, players like Deshaun Watson, only come around once. And the Texans, if they trade him, they'll be hoping that, their next QB is half as good as Watson. I mean, that's just what comes down to it. And to me, it would be a huge mistake. And I know Watson wants to be in their head coach discussion, but you do that because he's that good. And he is right now, after Bill O'Brien obliterated your franchise, basically, he is the franchise.
He's the franchise. In my eyes, he is just one step behind that Rodgers-Mahomes class. I see him as the third best quarterback in the league, and he's under contract for 5 more years, okay? You don't see that kind of player ever that just wants out, And if a team like Miami has the opportunity to even get on the line with them, they should give them all the picks. They should give him Tua. They should give him the 3, the 18, and just keep it coming, because you very rarely get the opportunity to get a quarterback that good, that young, under contract for that long. And Alex Foles, our producer, doesn't like that take, but I stand by it.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about Deshaun Watson in that I wasn't sure that all of the fuss in the beginning, I'm not entirely sure that he really even had any spot in the front office that he could be making these calls. But I also understand that he is a generational talent. So should you just do what he says because you want to keep him? I mean, if he leaves, the Texans head coaching job becomes really undesirable and really ugly. And so I think that for right now, maybe it would be best to cater to his needs in this moment and to include him in the head coaching and give him what he wants. But in general, I wasn't sure if I was a fan of that move.
Yeah, I mean, Watson's playing hardball, but I would too, because the Texans have made basically every move to hurt him. They took away his star receiver. They took away his.
That's true. Okay, he should have had a talk about DeAndre Hopkins, but does he have any room to talk about head coaching and other things
Yes, he does. He does
because he's a great QB, and you would love any QB. If Tua turns into Deshaun Watson, you're thrilled. And we don't know if that's going to happen or not. So why would you trade away a sure thing when a team like the Browns, it seems like they finally got it right with Baker. They were waiting 20, 25 years to find the right QB. It doesn't grow on trees. And I feel when you look at, all these QBs and teams with QBs, I think the Saints are one of them as a Saints fan. You're spoiled, though. You have they just grow on trees. Look at the Packers. They get Brett Favre and they move right to Aaron Rodgers. They almost get better. You go from Brett Favre, who's amazing, and Rodgers may be better than him. So I don't know if everyone, realizes that QBs don't, these generational top 5 QBs grow on trees. And, at a certain point, let's say even if Watson's pick doesn't work out, and let's say you hire his head coach and it doesn't work out, okay, so it's 1 or 2 years, you have him under contract for 5 years. And so to me, that's just, I wouldn't get rid of him.
You lose the number 1 receiver in football, and then you lead the league in passing yards. That's insane. That's insane.
I mean, yes, you're right in these regards. He is a generational talent.
What's
and so
the
why
but?
should they trade
What's
him?
the but, Kayla?
I don't know. I just don't think that he should demand. Okay, so the Texans should have never promised him that he was going to be a part of the talks to begin with. So point 1, he should never have been told that he could have a say in it all. But then point 2, I don't know why he expected to have a say in it all. I guess I think that Tom Brady would have a say for the Patriots, but Deshaun Watson hasn't been with the Texans all that long. And then when he doesn't have a stay, he immediately wants to go. Like, I don't know, from a matter of pride, do the Texans want to really just work with him to try to make sure that he stays at their team and baby him? Like, I guess they do, but from pride standpoint and ego standpoint, I think that would hurt.
I don't think it like it's, to me it's like I don't think that like Deshaun Watson, like when you look at quarterbacks that pick head coaches, like Baker Mayfield did it and it didn't work out, like it worked out awfully. And like you can't just have a head coach that just works with the QB. They're the head coach of the whole team, not just the head coach of, the quarterback. So like maybe it wouldn't work out. But then just like what happened with Baker Mayfield, it was a 1-year blip. And now Baker kind of was like, oh, I should probably let the GM pick the head coach. And then, they look like they're on the right track. And I'd be willing to sacrifice 1 to 2 years if his pick didn't work out to get a whole career worth of Deshaun Watson. Like, even as, a Saints fan, I would love them to trade for Deshaun Watson. I'd give up three years worth of first round picks, because you'd rather give up, just a little bit now and then be good with Deshaun Watson. I mean, you take the once in generational talents, when you can get them. And to me, that's, I think, the whole thing with Watson. And he's a guy that could win you a Super Bowl. To me, not many QBs, can do that. And that will wrap up our NFL talk, as, I love talking about the NFL. Definitely very interesting when you look at these QBs. And, on Sunday you have 4 all-time greats going at it, or, I mean, at least to me 3, and then Josh Allen, I think, is on his way. I think Patrick Mahomes is on their way as well, but should definitely be really interesting. So we're going to finish off the show talking about the NBA, as the Nets finally got their big 3 back on the court, but ran into a little of a stumble tonight. But first, we are going to take a quick break. You are listening to One on One Nightly. We're back here on One Nightly. I'm Andrew Galata alongside Jack Roach here. And Jack, we're going to get into talking about here the Nets, as they finally got their big 3 back. Kyrie, Harden, Durant. Kyrie returned, but it was a blip in the road. The Nets, I think the big thing is here, I mean, they lose this game 147 to 135 to the Cavs. 42 points from Colin Sexton, and no disrespect to Colin Sexton, but if he's scoring 42 points, I think the Nets, that's going to be their struggle, is defense. We all know that they can score a ton. And to me, when we're going to talk about with the Nets meshing, I think it's more on the defensive side of the ball, because I don't think, like, obviously they're going to go out, try to win a championship. I don't think they can do that without defense.
Yeah, agreed. Listen, we were not able to watch the whole game. I watched, I want to say, the majority of the first half. And what I saw, like, I want to form an opinion on it, but a lot of what I saw was not incredibly shocking, right? So you see this Nets team and you see what they're capable of on offense. They were 10 of 10 on their first 10 field goals. That offense looked really good really early. Harden was clicking with DeAndre Jordan, and Kyrie was getting his ISO shots, and it looked good. And then the next minute, the Cavs are going on a run of their own, and they end up giving up 147 points to the Cleveland Cavaliers. And that's a lot of points, but I don't really know how shocking that is, considering what their strengths and weaknesses are. And to me, the most glaring statistic of the whole game is Kyrie Irving's assists. And after 2 overtimes, including the whole game of regulation, he finishes with 3 assists.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with them, it's you can't judge them all one game. I think we could all agree with that. That I mean, look, I mean, I feel like Kyrie and them three, they're gonna have to mesh, and they're gonna have to get playing well together. And to me, my mind is, I mean, if you have 3 star players, star scorers like that, you're going to be lethal any night, and you can win any night. But I mean, to me, I mean, this team, you have to play like a team. And I feel like in basketball, I think everyone talks about the stars and all that stuff. But I think one thing, like LeBron, what he does so well to get every team in the finals, he's such a good facilitator. And then Nets have to find who that guy's going to be. And maybe it's Kyrie eventually. Maybe it's James Harden. Maybe it's Kevin Durant, who is just an amazing scorer. He could score with anybody. And I mean, I guess maybe he could be a guy that he's already played on a super team, so he knows that. I don't know. To me, it's going to be, I think a tough beginning for the Nets, and then hopefully for them, it all comes together. But when they play good, solid basketball teams like, the Celtics, or a team like the Bucks that have played together for a long time, and, they're going to play sound basketball, you give up 147 points to the Cavs. What are you going to give up to those teams that have played together, the fundamentally sound teams? Like, are you going to try to outscore everybody? Because that's not going to work.
Yeah, and I think this was Colin Sexton's first game back from injury. He puts up 42 points. I understand. I'm a big believer in James Harden, and he's gotten much better on the defensive end. But Kyrie Irving is not a good defender. Not even a little bit. He's not a good defender. And it seems like the guy who's played the most games in a Nets jersey out of that big 3, which is Kyrie Irving, already seems like kind of the odd man out, And to me, it seems like he's going to have to really take on the biggest sacrifice and give up some of those isolation plays, because to me, I think James Harden's capable of doing that, and he's showing it just with his willingness to spread the ball. He led the team in assists tonight with 12.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like James Harden, I mean, he's a guy that I feel like, especially in year one, I feel like he definitely wants to go after that ring, and he's going to do anything to do it, especially playing with the Rockets for all those years and getting so close. Like, Kyrie's a guy that, I mean, I feel like if anyone's going to be not motivated on that Nets team, it's going to be him. Not only has he won a ring, but he's already left the team, for, outside personal issues and personal things that he wants to do. And that's all great. But, I feel like if he's going to commit to the Nets, you're going to have to see him pass more. You're going to have to see him give up some ISOs. And it's going to be interesting to see what he does. I think it's very interesting because, you look at these 3 stars and, on paper, it's all great, but I mean, who's the guy that, I feel like to try to balance everything, and it's going to be interesting to see how that all works. And, you talk about Kyrie, is he a guy that feels like, oh, I just want to get my shots and I want to be able to be that A guy, but with 3 stars, you have to all coexist. And I don't know if Kyrie will end up doing that. I don't know, maybe this was just his first game back, so just getting used to playing with him. I think that's, before we all overreact, it was their first game together, but I feel like the Nets, that's going to be their storyline because they really have 2 years here to win a championship, and then they could be in big trouble just, with all the picks they gave up and all that stuff. So to me, that's going to be really important.
Yeah, the Nets are at a championship or bust point, right? That's completely the case here. And if you give up 147 points to the Cleveland Cavaliers, how many points are you going to give up to LeBron James and Anthony Davis? They got torched by a guard tonight. What are you going to do when you're playing versatile big men, guys that can do so many different things, and you really don't have the answer?
Yeah, I mean, is DeAndre Jordan going to go up against, what is he going to do against those types of teams? And you talk about, it's going to be interesting to see them play. I think in the playoffs, and you talk about like you were trying to see what you learned from them playing on the floor, and I don't think you'll know really until the playoffs, until you see teams, really the higher echelon teams go after them, and that have the star power to beat them. You talk about LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Maybe the Clippers come out; they have a ton of star power. I mean, even in the East, what Giannis and what he's going to do with the Bucks, and I like the Celtics a lot. I think they're a team that's just played well together. I think if any team, is going to be just 3 stars put together, it's going to be a team like the Celtics that have played together for a long time. You still have the young core there. Again, to me, it's a tough loss, but to me, nothing with the Nets, I feel like you're going to know until the playoffs.
Agreed. And we're gonna learn a lot more about them in that first playoff series against maybe a bottom feeder, which I think goes against your point. You think that they should shrink the playoffs. We should do away with those series. I think that's going to be really interesting for a team like the Nets.
I think they win it regardless because they have stars.
They win it.
Like start.
But
I think. Yeah, I think that's important.
How commanding how dominant do they look? How well do they play? It's important.
If that's how we're talking about the playoffs, then I think we have an issue about we know this team's going to win by how much they're going to win. This is the playoffs. This is win or go home. I think it's a talk and it's a discussion for another day because
Agreed.
We hit 10:30 here. So with all that said, I think it's time to wrap up the show. We covered a lot today, from baseball to football and all those conversations, finishing off here with the Nets. And I had a great time. So for our producer, Alex Walls, who kept the lights on tonight, and my partners, Jack Roach and Kayla Wenzel, I'm Andrew Galata. Have a good rest of your night. One-on-One Nightly is a production of WFUV Sports.